Welcome everyone. This session is ValueTrack People Flows. The focus will be on gathering the right stakeholders to actually realize market breakthroughs. To get there, there's a whole process, an ongoing process of validation to make sure that everybody stays involved and everybody can be open to what they have to offer for collective development. We will just take you through this, and in this session, we will actually try to give you some triggers on how we could establish this, because this is the kickoff of the European Entrepreneurship Roundtables. And this will be a number of sessions towards October the 14th, where the real EU Entrepreneurship Summit will be held next to CES Unveiled in Amsterdam. And we welcome you, hopefully, to be there physically and not only virtually, though I hope this session will be a good trigger to make it happen. And we're all working towards the same goal, I believe, especially in people flows. Just before we start off, I'd like to give you some practical information. Everybody will be on mute, and we will unmute you when it's part of the script or when you ask some questions or raise your hand, which we can see in the chat function and in the Zoom. Then the other part is that everything will be broadcasted and broadcasted via YouTube. And there will also be online people online who will not be in the session, but still are following our session. First of all, let me introduce our ValueTrack lead People Flows, Harm-Jan Arendshorst.
Thank you, Tess. And this is really a great opportunity to talk to you at a turning point of really getting back our economy, travel again, reunite with our beloved ones. And I think also this is a unique roundtable with I'm humbled and privileged by the speakers today, where we really see the value of working together to solve problems like this for now, for COVID, and to build a trustworthy future digital way of living.
Thank you very much. First of all, we'd like to look at it from a broader perspective, a more strategic perspective. And in this case, we'd like to get an idea on what the collective value case is behind people flows. What is the impact when we do realize all these innovations out there? Please let me introduce to you Virginia Messina, and she's a Senior Vice President, Advocacy and Communications of World Travel and Tourism Council.
Hi, good afternoon, and thank you very much for having me, and thank you, Harm, for the invitation. I did have a couple of slides to share with you this afternoon, if we're able to perhaps show those on the screen.
Yes.
Thank you. Excellent. So just very briefly as an introduction, I represent the World Travel and Tourism Council. So effectively, we bring together over 200 chief executives around the world on travel and tourism. If we move into the next slide, actually, I have that introduction. So we cover all the different industries, so all the way from airports, airline, cruise destinations, technology platforms, and across all the different geographies. So from Americas all the way to Asia Pacific, and we have a very broad membership. So what we have been doing for over 30 years, we have been producing research in terms of the impact of travel and tourism around the world, and of course a focus in some very key policy areas. Next slide, please. So when we talk about what travel and tourism brings to the economy, I kind of like to go back sort of over a decade, because we had been showing an incredible trend of growth. So for over 9 consecutive years, travel and tourism outpaced the global economy. So that means that our contribution to GDP was stronger than the world's GDP growth. And so in 2019, we felt we were certainly leaving the golden age of travel. We had been growing for a really long time. We contributed 10.3% to global GDP and supported more than 330 million jobs in the planet. So these were over 1 in every 10 jobs in the world were in our sector, and 1 in every 4 new jobs were in our sector as well. And of course, that back then and pre-COVID, that trend was set to continue. So the way we travel and having seamless traveler flows was certainly a priority since back then. Unfortunately, if we move into the next slide, we know that COVID has hit our sector significantly. I think we've been one of the hardest hit sectors, and our GDP dropped by 49%, over 49%, whereas the global economy only dropped by 3.7%. So just to put things into perspective, and unfortunately our contribution to GDP in 2020 was only 5.5%, and we know 62 million jobs were lost, while many more still remain at risk and supported by furlough schemes around the world. And just to continue in terms of the impact, if we move on to the next slide, I've been asked many times how bad COVID is. And actually, I mean, the slide doesn't show this properly because the drop was too deep, unfortunately. But if we compare this to 2009, that was the previous significant shock to our sector in the global financial crisis. Back then, travel and tourism GDP dropped by 4%. And again, we're talking about nearly 18 times more. Pardon. So I think just to put things into context of how bad this is, and of course, we are seeing light at the end of the tunnel, particularly in Europe. We are seeing all the right messages from different member states reopening, whether it's France, whether it's Spain and Italy, welcoming fully vaccinated travelers. And of course, with the implementation of the COVID certificate in July, we expect travel to pick up. And the question is, how do we enable that seamless travel movement of people effectively? So next slide, please. Seamless travel, for that reason, and security and travel facilitation have been core to everything that we do for many years. And since before COVID, we were focusing on technologies such as biometrics and contactless technologies that in some parts around the world, like the US, we're certainly advancing in airport screening, border agencies, and we saw a number of different initiatives. So I think for us, it's really how this kind of digital technology at borders has now been enhanced and accelerated with the current health emergency that we have experienced. Next slide, please. So in that sense, we had been looking, as I said, at the safe and seamless traveler journey for many years now, and looking at how technology was going to help us enhance that security and make that traveler journey seamless. And with COVID, we started looking at what was going to be needed, and we came up with this report that is available on our website. But there were 5 principles of success that are obviously very relevant to everything we're discussing. One, which is public-private sector collaboration, data collection and sharing, data privacy, of course, is paramount, interoperability, and lastly, customer first by design. And as part of this same report, if we move on to the next slide, we started looking at sort of public sector and private sector call to action and what needed to be done from both sides. So we know the digital travel identity has been advancing. We know there's entities like ICAO and others that have their digital travel credential, and that this is perhaps not moving at a quick pace, but certainly is going to be very relevant as we move forward. We know countries need to invest in digital and physical infrastructure. And we also know that collaboration between different ministries, so whether it's tourism, health, national security, and transport is crucial really to move us forward. Same international coordination among governments we have seen throughout this crisis that is going to be fundamental. as well as the adoption of all these new innovative and digital technologies that will enable better management of visitor flows and improvement of the traveler experience while making it safer. So on the private sector side, we of course are supporting governments in this process, coming up with all these innovative and digital technologies and providing consistent coordinated communication to travelers. I think that is one that is critical at the time where we are, where there is certainly confusion in terms of what the different regulations are, and that's why private sector plays a key role to sort of fill that gap. And of course, we're cooperating with governments in terms of all the different requirements in terms of COVID testing and vaccination certificates. Next slide, please. We know there's a lot of support for digital passes, and even in the past when we were looking at biometrics and while the privacy conversation is certainly relevant, we know the will is there. We know passengers are willing to share or prove their data in order to have a seamless journey. So when we think particularly about health or digital health passes, we know 78% of travelers are willing to think they will need to use something like this to enter a country, and 73% believe this will make travel safer. And this is a strong sort of trend across all different demographics. Next slide, please. So we know there's a lot going on around the world in terms of digital passes. We know there's a number of different solutions, and I know this is going to be addressed later by our friends and colleagues at ID 2020, who recently launched their blueprint on interoperability. And we have seen also a lot of positive steps at the policy level. So we obviously are very aware of the COVID-19 certificate at the EU level. We know ICAO have put forward their test certificate standards, and also OECD recently released a framework for actually reopening international travel, including the use of digital passes, as well as the G7 actually, who only a few days ago, I believe the health ministers agreed to work on a health certificate to prove COVID status. So there are some positive steps, and the question is, how do we make this? I mean, how do we get this functional? How do we get governments to accept these passes, and also travelers to feel comfortable with it? Next slide, please. So from our perspective, what we need to do to move forward is effectively focus on these digital passes for international travel. So one of the things we have heard from our members is there's a number of use cases, whether it's for health, whether it's for getting the communities and the cities back on track, but not necessarily for travel. And I think that's certainly needed. We need health checks for travel that are consistent and automated and integrated with the operational systems in the most effective way through internationally agreed standards. We, of course, need common terminology, whether it's pass and certificate, probably not passport, because we know that could include additional data that might not be relevant for people to be traveling. We need a minimum data set requirement, and we hopefully need government trust and acceptance of these digital passes, as I mean, all underpinned by strong public and private collaboration. So that's the perspective I wanted to share today. Again, thank you for the invitations, and happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Virginia. To me, indeed, because I'm definitely not one of the experts, but it looks like a quite complex environment. Though this is so relevant that we understand each other's views and each other's perspectives. And there will be a lot of crossovers. And just to make sure that, by the way, if anyone has any questions to Messina, please feel free to share them via the chat. And also, we will make sure to follow up on this. Like I said, there's always continuity. So thank you very much. And we hope to keep you in the loop for what's coming next. In that sense, it also is interesting to see the perspective from Bart. Thank you very much. De Lathouwer. He's the president of the, he's the president of the Open Geospatial Consortium. And please, can you give your introduction?
Absolutely. Thanks so much. And I'd like to applaud Virginia Messina for her presentation earlier, and the human aspect of it, that we're going to see each other again. I've been homebound now for a year and a half, mostly, being indoors, where I turn left during the week and I turn right over the weekends to downstairs. I recently had the results of a blood test where your vitamin D was supposed to be between 30 and 100, and I was at minus 23. So I gave back to the sun, apparently. No, but just a perspective, at the end of the light of the end of the tunnel has light. Let me put it that way. And so just from a human point of view, looking forward to meeting people again. The reason I say this is that we're here in a context of entrepreneurship, innovation. This is a intrinsic human interaction. This is about trust. And you can throw as many Zoom meetings at it as you want. It's that person-to-person interaction where you build that trust when you bring organizations together. So I think that's an important statement to make, and I'm super happy that is confirmed here. I'm looking forward to getting back out again and meeting the members of the OGC and anyone I can connect to. So, just sorry for that little diversion here, but I think it's important just to add that aspect here, and I think it's very relevant. People flow is a very location, call it problem, call it thingy, whatever you want, but it has a big, if people move from A to B, they move from location A to location B. And that is what the OGC supports. We're a collective problem-solving body where we bring together global experts on location and users. Again, to the previous speakers and to the speakers that come after me, is that these are users of location, geospatial, so you want, which is another term for what we do. And we advance our mission of making location information fair, findable, interoperable. Virginia had it on her slides, point number 3 or 4, if I remember well, accessible and reusable. And so that's absolutely important for us, and where we deliver open consensus-based standards and best practices on how to exchange that information. And so it's the open standards that provide the basis for innovation. The open standard itself is not the innovation, but it allows for innovation. It allows that level playing field where the entrepreneurs, the startups, the organizations can come together and solve a common problem that they have, which is often in the context of this talk here. People moving from A to B has that location aspect in it. And so what we're seeing right now, and I think this is important as well also for the other speakers, what I see is that location information is democratizing. Whereas in the last, the OGC is now almost 30 years old. And so we started in the 90s, and we were well ahead of the curve on how to share information on the web. What we've seen right now is that the other communities have advanced as well, and that now, and thanks to the OGC here, and all our members, the 550 members that I represent happily on this in this webinar, is as we democratize that, it becomes available. Whereas in the past, it was available to a select group, our bubble, if I can use a COVID term, and that now is opening up to the entire world. And that will sprout so much innovation. And so that's something that we'd like to facilitate in the OGC as part of the ValueTrack, where you have all these various perspectives and support that you want to give to the entrepreneurs, and that we can support you with from that aspect of location.
Thank you very much.
All right,
yes.
Good.
So I think this might be a good opportunity to look at it, as you said as well. Part of the solution are the entrepreneurs that come up with all these solutions. So what I'd like to do is introduce 2 entrepreneurs who are, especially now in times of COVID, who found each other, and they started up one of these technical solutions in relation to what the market need is. And I would like to see how they can inspire you, and if there indeed are options for them to connect to your wider network and make sure that we find these breakthroughs in the market. Please. Theo Breuyers, Albert Akkermans.
Okay, my name is, thank you for the introduction, Tess. My name is Theo Breuyers. I'm CEO of Compass Software and one of the founders of PeopleFlows, the company. That's a company that started mid-January. And what we did is to try with ValueTrack principles to build very fast a product that people will be tested, and that it starts with tested from people for COVID until the end. That goes to the end where they enter a stadium or an office or a restaurant of everything what you want. We started with, I think, 3 or 4 people in the beginning. The team is now bigger. We can do it. The product is ready. It's working on this moment. We are doing the last test on it. Pen testing also by the Ministry of Health, if we can send all the information there inside. And we hope to finish it somewhere in the next 2 weeks. The thing is that it is now an island.
What is the exciting part of your solution? Why is it interesting to other stakeholders in the room, online, out there?
It is a complete system from the beginning until the end. So it is from starting, inviting people for testing, send it to a ministry or someone else, take the data there again, and use them to let people go into a stadium or theater or whatever what you want. And we have a lot of experience with my own company with GDPR, and it is completely GDPR proof. Even if we use face recognition to see if you are really the one which passport you scanned in before. So it's beautiful and it works completely nice. It's nice to work with all of these mid-sized companies together. It goes much faster than what you normally do.
Okay, so you believe you outsmarted people with your software, right?
Yes.
So I'm more than happy for people to challenge Theo on this in the near future. So that would be nice to make it part of the value track, because I can believe that there are many other entrepreneurs out there who also deliver towards the same solution. And in that sense, from your perspective, because your background or your product is merely testing, the testing itself, and how do you feel you can leverage each other's solution and deliver it to the environment or the context where it's needed?
Okay, thank you, Tess. My name is Albert Akkermans. I founded this company. It's a medical company on testing and vaccination, about 200 employees right now. And what we are doing, we're taking our test and vaccination results and putting that into PO's system, and then providing it to the Corona checker, and then providing it to what we say the EU COVID-19 pass. First of all, it's going to start with the EU COVID-19 pass Netherlands, and then it will be upgraded to the EU COVID-19 pass for Europe. And that's very important because everybody wants to know if you are vaccinated or if you are tested. Because if you are sitting in an airplane for 8 or 10 hours, maybe for 4 hours, you want to make sure that your fellow passenger is safe for you.
Or in a room like this.
Or in a room like this. And that's amazing, because that's quite different from a few years ago. Because a few years ago, we just believed everybody is safe in the plane. But right now, if you're in a room or in a plane, you're not feeling comfortable if you're not sure that everybody is tested or everybody has a vaccination. So that's more a digital solution to open up the economy again.
And do you see a lot of international opportunities?
I think we have a passport right now, and you already mentioned that, Virginia. E-health passport also will be provided in the future if you go to a cinema or if you go by airplane to another country. I think that will be new for our worldwide economy, and it will be open up our economy again. But there is still a lot of things to be done, and I think in June this month, I think the first results will be in the Corona checker, the Dutch version of the digital pass. And I think in July, it will be in the European system. So it will be quite interesting to see what's going to happen.
We would be interested to hear from you as well. If you heard more about these type of solutions, you know, what is your perspective? So please share this with us via chat. Harm-Jan, thank you very much.
So, so we have Ton van Gessel, also remotely connected due to the cyber situation today. He was expected to be here face-to-face, physical with us. Unfortunately, that is not the case. But Ton, you're connected, correct?
Sorry about it. Can you all hear me?
Very
Hello?
good. Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, fine.
Ton, you're in.
Okay. What's the question?
So welcome, and sorry you're not here face to face, and maybe you can give a little bit of a background of an introduction of yourself, the current situation at SkyTeam, and the challenges that you see for the industry and the need for collaboration.
To start with, yeah. In this area, since a year ago, COVID started, and you know, we're all working very hard to make things happen and to get to fly again, of course. And there are multiple.
Ton, excuse me, but the line might be bad, or you're not speaking in the microphone, because we have a problem hearing you. So can you try one more time? By the way, Ton van Gessel is the Chief Security Officer of SkyTeam.
Yes, but hello, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. I cannot tell you a lot.
Oké.
So,
Ik denk dat we later terug moeten.
Ja, is goed.
Excuse me. Sometimes this is what you get with virtual meetings, unfortunately. We would have rather had you here, Tom, but we understand there's a situation going on, and this is why you're not here. Obviously, like we said, there's continuity, so we hope to see you back and get your input ASAP. But for now, we might want to go to the next speaker.
Yes, so also we have online Tessa Blanca.
Yes, hello.
Hi, and good to see you. Welcome. Maybe you can give a little bit of a background of yourself and the research that you are doing related to the people flows.
Yes, of course. So I'm Tessa Blanca. I'm a postdoctoral researcher at the University of Amsterdam. And since a year, together with a small group of people, with Charlotte Tanis and Danny Borsboom and Fabian Lablander, we've been developing a framework to actually assess the effectiveness of behavioral interventions on physical distancing. So I think contrary to what I've heard before, we're not really involved with testing or virus transmission in a medical sense, but we're really focusing on behavior, given that behavior is needed and contact moments are needed to for the virus to spread. We have really focused on a methodological framework actually to test the effectiveness of interventions. So we've now put this into practice twice. We've done an assessment at an art fair with the Smart Distance Lab and also at the supermarket. And basically what we've done, we contrasted various interventions. So for example, on one day, we just measured as is. So we gave people sensors to track their distances between one another, which is a completely anonymous way of tracking their behavior. And then on the second day, for example, we had walking directions. And by by keeping everything similar, but only varying one factor, we could then later on see the effectiveness of this intervention on the contexts that were being formed. And this gave us many insights. So for example, the unidirectional walking directions really lowered the number of contacts in an art fair, but it did not in the supermarket. And at the same time in the supermarket, we were able to show that giving people a reward for keeping their distance actually worked really well. So people made less contacts when getting a reward. So this is basically what we've been doing.
Wow, and really interesting. And I know the side story of that. So can you give a little bit of a hint what kind of reward was helping the public to behave better?
Yeah, so this was actually, I think, interesting from a more psychological perspective. So I think that for a long time, we've been hearing that physical distancing is important. Mm-hmm. And we also heard from many people that they're really motivated to keep their distance, but it's sometimes really difficult. And we do hear often that we don't keep distance enough. And it's a bit of a, well, maybe a punishment, like, oh, the cafes need to be shut down again and everything. And at least I sometimes felt that we needed to do more, but we were already trying so hard. So what we tried to do from a psychological perspective was really approach it in a more positive way. And as soon as people came into the supermarket, we said, well, here is your sensor. And as soon as you hand it back in, you will get a reward for keeping your distance. And at the end, they received chocolate eggs for Easter. And actually, it really affected their behavior. So they made less contacts. And if they made a contact, so if they were within 1.5 meters of someone else, this lasted shorter. So it really it was effective on two ways, like less contacts and shorter contacts. So I think this really shows that we should sometimes think out of the box and have also a positive way to help people keeping their distance. Yeah.
Yes. And you have also one slide to share, I believe.
Yeah. Will it be put on up by you, or how does it work? Here.
Yeah. One?
Yeah, great. So this is actually the idea of the framework. It's that we measure contacts, and contacts are a tricky thing because it always involves two people, and therefore statistically, I won't bore you with that, but it can be a bit tricky to analyze the data. So we came up with the framework of contact networks. So basically, what you see here is 2 different days at the supermarket. Every node is a person, and whenever 2 persons came within 1.5 meters, they share a link. And by visualizing it in these contact networks allows us to do many sophisticated graph metrics on there. And it really let us get into the depth of the structure of the contact network. And it gives us clues as to where to intervene, how to intervene. So it's really, I'd say a rich framework that we can adapt to many different situations, to many contexts, and really get clues on how to work with these people flows.
Right. And is this something you would like to share with others as well? Is this something where you invite people either because they have the data and they can put it in your structure, or where they come up with other environments where you can apply the model?
Yes, definitely. So we've been working really hard for the past year to build this framework and analysis techniques. And we're really hoping to share this with people and to gain insights in different contexts. So if you'd have a research question, if you have a question, we're really happy to apply our framework and share the data and technology. Yeah.
Very good.
Great.
And well, thank you so much. And so this is interactive, guys. If there's questions or if it's relevant for maybe Rotterdam Innovation Airports, contact tracing or physical distancing, I think the next problem or challenge will be how will people behave at the airports, in the plane? So is it a challenge?
It certainly is a challenge.
Oh, can you stand up in front of the microphone, please?
It certainly is a challenge for an airport who opens up very quickly now, because travelers are coming in and hope to go out. Mm-hmm. So it's a challenge to seek innovative products who can smoothen the people flow.
Great. So from Royal Hospital. Do you see a relationship with contact information and physical distancing?
Hi, Tessa. I'm also working at the Municipality of Amsterdam. I think I saw your presentation before. I'm working for Royal Hospital DHV, but also the program manager for the crowd monitoring system of Amsterdam, CMSA. You probably know it. The challenge is...
Maybe introduce.
Sorry?
For your name and the whole...
Yeah, I'm the program manager and my name is Ilko Tillier. And I do that for the Traffic Management Department of Amsterdam. Rachel, Bieshuis Tienkamp, and Daniel van Mopman. And also I work closely together with the Chief Technology Office in Amsterdam. Well, the key for the solution is to find the variables that you want to have. And contact moments, they are variables, but you see in the crowd monitoring and also distancing, when you know the number of people per square meter, that is a very reliable indication also to connect your measures to. And it's always the challenge, well, to translate the research to practical solutions. And yeah, so I think it's a good idea, Tessa, that we contact each other, yes, and then we can discuss that.
Perfect.
Yeah, I'd like that very much. And maybe also to get back to the airports briefly, like what we just did this afternoon, we gave a lecture at the University of Amsterdam, and here they also trying to open up more. So you see a lot of signage, you see dots, where can students sit, where should they stand, and also today we handed out the sensors and we're measuring, and there are so many ideas, right? We have all these ideas for how to facilitate the people flows, how to distribute the students evenly through the college buildings to make sure that they can adhere to these physical distancing measures. And I can imagine the same goes for the airports, that there must be many ideas on how to facilitate this. And we're really trying to help out and sort of map out what works and how can we help in the best way possible.
Yeah, I'd like to react to that, Tessa. I think you are absolutely spot on. It's important to have the data, but it's even more important to do something with the data and translate it into measures and see what is effective. So you need to organize the whole chain. That can be a bit complex because different parties are involved, and it's really a challenge to make them work together.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Yes.
I do think, if I can, one last comment, we are working on our pipeline. So we have a modular pipeline. So we do not only collect the data, but we actually developed several metrics that we can use to compare these networks and say something about effectiveness. So we're really working on that. I'm also curious to hear more about your perspectives on that. So it's definitely nice to be in touch. Yeah.
Thank you.
Just quick reaction from the OGC here. And that's on indoor navigation. I think we're somewhat touching on indoor navigation. And so there's a lot of interoperability specifications available right now. And one of the highlights more recently is that the Apple IMDF specification for indoor navigation has been contributed to the OGC as an open specification. Yeah. So I think that opens up a lot of possibilities. Very interested in Tessa's graph as well. Mm. And how, that could translate into, how we're going to use that for indoor navigation. So the graph itself didn't have any location aspects, as far as I could see. It was more related to the links between the various players, but how that can be mapped on indoor.
Totally agree.
If you want to join, if there's anyone who says, I want to be involved, if you're going to investigate where this is going to go, just give us a shout and you're in. It's that easy. Please, Harm-Jan, can you introduce the next person?
So, welcome, Kees. We go a long time back in ETSI and the Alliance of Internet of Things and many more. Working on standards as well for contact tracing and physical distancing. So welcome, Kees. Maybe you can give a little bit of background of yourself and the research and efforts on standards.
Okay, I'll try to be short because otherwise I will need 4 hours or something. I'm a physicist with a long experience in telecommunications, in setting up projects from artificial kidneys to helicopter blades. And at the moment, for the last couple of years, I've been working very much in the health sector, trying to make technical contributions to standardization, which means that I can help, I can advise people, can help them. But I must say, sometimes I'm also a little bit a difficult person because I want to see perfection. And when I hear the word interoperability, I want to see interoperability. So a full understanding and not the intention of doing something together, okay? Which for me is a very different thing. Can I have my slides are already there. Okay. Our life has been very much influenced by King COVID-19, which you see on the left, okay? Can we go to the next one? This was only publicity. Okay, so I want to look at tools, okay? The tools that we have at our disposal that we still need to survive COVID-19 and possibly the follow-ons. And first conclusions is lessons learned. Our preparedness and reaction to COVID-19 were far from optimal. And don't misunderstand me, I'm not going to criticize anybody. I feel that we have a joint responsibility for doing not always the right things, and sometimes because we didn't know what to do. We have been overtaken by COVID-19, by the size, by the speed it developed, and we didn't know what to do. The experts, they lacked time to investigate, and they still have incomplete information, okay? To the extent that, and we'll come back to that later, that together with an American colleague, we have a publication out that calls the situation systemic data accident. You have data that you understand is incomplete, is incorrect, but nevertheless, people want you to draw conclusions from it. Because without the conclusions, we cannot do anything, okay? So this is a very difficult situation. I'm not going to I don't like to use the word politics. I think if I look, for example, at the Dutch government, I'm not always happy with what they do, okay? Sometimes I have a different opinion, but I have to accept that they have done a fair balancing act between safety, pragmatic decisions, and constraining society. I mean, it's very difficult, okay? And just to give you an example, I see people that a couple of months ago said that COVID-19 didn't exist, then it was just the flu, and now they say that the government is responsible for thousands of deaths because we should have taken not 1.5, but 8 meters distance. You make a calculation for a supermarket, 8 meters distance means closing the supermarket. Okay, so it's very difficult, and I feel co-responsible for all of that, okay? We have an issue with privacy. Privacy has been very dominating the whole discussion, especially when it comes to digital tools. I'm afraid to say that it has been too constraining. At the same time, we see that if somebody gets ill, that the privacy is basically lost. And at the same time, we see that people in their private life give away their privacy and even more than that. So we need to find a better balance there. Final point here is that we're not free from COVID-19 yet. COVID-19 is going to stay around, I'm afraid, for another 2 years or so. Maybe less for us, but in other countries it will continue with all the risks. And that means that we have to continue to fight it and that we have to adapt our tools to fighting it, okay? And that's not straightforward. Can I have the next slide? Okay, I try to go through it a bit fast because otherwise I get killed, I think. So we have developed tools for, we had very little tools to support this in a situation like COVID-19, okay? The tools we had were not adapted at all, were not adapted to the volume of the situation, to the seriousness of the situation. So let me just say that we have been running behind, okay? We have developed tools with the best intentions, and the quality of the tools is quite good, but we're underutilizing the tools. They're not well coordinated with existing systems. We haven't had the time to be forward-looking, and we need to do better. Okay, can I have the next slide? Then to look at some tools that have allowed people to survive. Okay, and I briefly go through it. There is something like tele-amusement, like people watching films, etc. That has worked very well, with the exception that maybe the networks were not always prepared for that. The thing that really worked well was tele-education. Those tools were tested, were well known, with one issue, and that is not everybody had access to the facilities and to the equipment to participate, not even universities and schools, okay? But if we would put some more money in equipment and facilities, then this would be a very strong point. That's not true for other areas. Teleworking, well, some companies had their own teleworking tools, but there is no good generic teleworking tools. With this as problem that the quality is not good, there's vulnerability, and there is security issues, okay? People that were not allowed to take their computer home to work now suddenly are sitting there with the computer on which their son has been playing games, okay? This is not exactly what we can support. Telemedicine, health over Skype is not telemedicine. We don't have good tools. We need to start developing them, not only for the next COVID, but also because simply we need them. And then there's an area like telemental healthcare. There is nothing for it. We have to start from scratch. You have the next slide, please. Okay, what do we do for the next pandemic? Okay, well, there will be one. I don't know when, but I can guarantee you that there will be one, okay? Maybe more than one. And it will be different from COVID-19. So we shouldn't make the same mistake as we made in the recent past, that we make a blueprint from what we know, and we say the next time we're going to do this. No, the next pandemic will be different. Our situation will be different. So what we need is models that can be parameterized. Okay, so the next time we start first trying to see what is different, tune the parameters, and then have something that will help us much better. Okay? In order to develop a vision, we need a better understanding of public and private health mitigation. We need to adapt tools that are in sync with the state of the art. Okay. We need tools for societal and for survival for society, because we've seen that just the medical tools is not sufficient. Okay, and we need to start in time developing them, and that is not when there is the next pandemic, but preferably before. I know how difficult it is, but we need to try. Can I have the next slide, please?
Can I say one quick thing, because this
Yes.
is extremely interesting. So I'm definitely not the expert in this, but we also run a value track called personalized medicine, personalized treatment. And there we have been doing a global search into some of the solutions that people like you were after. So we did big scraping, we integrated with all the hubs, medical hubs, etc. And we got so many interesting companies. And I dare you that from there, we will deliver some solutions to you that are at least of your interest, and give you an idea that it's not non-existing, it's definitely existing. And these guys are waiting to go to market, but they say there's no business case for me. There's no collective value case for me. So thank you very much for confirming the way the value track works, because we can take from one focus domain, we can take it to the other one to introduce it to each other in order to get that crossover, to get these insights, so you can set your next step.
Okay, two reactions on that.
Oh,
Number one,
sorry
for that. Okay, one is that we need tools that are integrated and that fit together. Okay, too many people are developing things that are fragmented and will stay fragmented. Okay, so that's one thing. The other thing is the business case. I have some publications on the business cases. The key issue in the health sector, in telehealth in particular, is that the benefits and the investments are in different places in the value chain. The key to that, we believe, is smart cities, because smart cities are the ones that benefit and can also invest. So without smart cities, it will not work. We need to mobilize the smart cities. Okay. I can still finish this one or not. I mean, it's up to you, huh?
Yeah, I'm wondering if it's good that.
Yeah, because I mean, people can also read it. I mean, so maybe the discussion is more interesting.
Just complete your.
Okay. So, contact tracing has not given enough results. We have seen that it has a positive contribution, but we have not used it in the best possible way. Okay. And in addition, in the tail of the pandemic, the situation is changing because the number of people that will get ill is smaller, and the motivation of people to use the contact tracers will be smaller as well. So we have to change our focus. We have tools to detect virus presence. So we need to focus now on detecting virus presence in what I call macro, so wastewater systems, but also localized in shopping centers, airports, railway stations, shopping malls, okay? That will help us to do testing and tracing more focused. And we need to do that because not only we need to test, but we also need to how do you call that? To detect the strains in the virus. Okay, you can only do that by testing. Now, to give you a very difficult example of contact tracing, and maybe that's also interesting for the other Tessa. That is an example that I sometimes give to people is two friends go to a restaurant to have dinner together. In front of the restaurant, they find a $1 bill. One picks it up, they hand it to each other, and they look whether it is a real one. And finally one said, yeah, it looks real. Okay, I'm going to the US, I take it, put it in his pocket. They've forgotten about the $1 bill. They go inside the restaurant, have dinner. 4 days later, both of them are ill. Now we get the first problem. They live in different cities. So the contact tracing, the privacy restrictions will not allow to put the information of the two persons together. So it will take unnecessarily long before we discover that it took place near the restaurant. Okay? When finally we arrive at the conclusion that it was near the restaurant, we think it was the restaurant. And so everybody that was in the restaurant, the waiters, the menus, the forks, everything is suspect now. And it was the $1 bill.
Oh,
thank you.
Thank you.
This really stresses the complexity and the ugly truth of real life. And so to test and to innovate in a situation like airports and where airlines are suffering from just financial stability and restarting. So how can you really initiate new innovations and that is needed for now and for the future at the time that it is most difficult and those changes are most ugly, right? So we need to test it. We need to test it in the field. Albert, maybe I can ask you to give your view on the need for not just local Netherlands collaboration, but your view on how to scale this up, what's needed for international.
Well, yeah, sorry, is this a micro? Yeah. Let me say one thing. First of all, when we started this company, it's a medical company. A year ago, we had one question. Am I safe? That's the first question. And the second question, we had two questions, actually. Are you safe? And based on medical information, do we have coronavirus or not? And that was the biggest question a year ago. Now, these days, we can measure that. We can do some testing on antibodies, or we can vaccinate you and whatever you want. But the main question is still going to remain in the future. From here, are you safe? So from a year from here, if we are in June 2022, everybody has his own, I call it EU COVID-19 health pass, yes or no? Because this is going to help us in building up the trust company again, because we lost trust. We lost trust in each other. And therefore, there is a lot of work to be done. There's a lot of systems should be in place. But first of all, if we are here a year from here, can we shake hands again? Based on, I trust you, you trust me, and based on some information which we collect. Mm-hmm. So I think that will be our main goal within 1 year.
So Miranda, maybe you can give your perspective on your view of innovation, especially in such a complex world as airports and airlines and the local region.
It's a broad question,
yes.
So I'm thinking about what angle to choose, but of course...
Can you actually go a bit closer?
I'm sorry. Of course, being able to trust each other is very important also for travelers, you and me, who are going to make use again of an airport. And so knowing it's safe is very important. And up till now, there is not yet a COVID passport, so we are longing for it, but it will take some time on the European level to realize that, I'm afraid.
Yes.
And then a question which follows is when do the authorities on the European level declare you safe? Now we do have the PCR tests. Of course, they take many, many hours. So I can't go to the airport with my ticket and say I will have a PCR test and my flight is leaving within 15 minutes. That's impossible. So I think there are a lot of entrepreneurs now working on tests who can be taken quicker and safer and maybe less invasive, because it's also a little bit troubling, our PCR test. And I think from a technical perspective, that has no reason at all. You can do it better with electrodes or something which is less annoying. And so one of the partners of the Rotterdam The Hague Innovation Network I'm working for is, I think, a little bit like you, also working on an innovative technique to have a very quick scan, an EPD scan, they call it. It's a long word, so I won't fill it in because I have to look it up. But it's a test you can take by electrodes within 3 minutes. So theoretically speaking, if the test is allowed, is approved on the EU level, on the national level by RIVM, then in the future, and time is of the essence, it could be used. So I think the techniques are there. There are several techniques, but in innovating, the problem is to be able to adjust them, to not only bring them to market in a final business case, but it's at this moment foremost the regulations who are keeping us behind, so to say, because our entrepreneurs, and maybe you have the same problem, do have the problem that they have to certificate their technology, the EPD scan, so they have to do a trial. They could do that at the airport in the region Rotterdam, The Hague, but it's very important that the national authorities, and for this one it is the RIVM, approve their technology to make the testing worthwhile. So the regulation is very important in being able to speed up in innovation.
So you have a manifest, you told me.
Maybe 3 words about Rotterdam The Hague Innovation Airport.
Please, yes.
to know what I'm talking about. Rotterdam The Hague Innovation Airport is an innovation platform. Enterprises, small and medium enterprises, working together with knowledge institutions and governmental organizations at the regional and the national levels. Not a large network, 70 parties, because there are no free drivers. All parties involved invest financially, with capacity and with projects in realizing our joint ambition, and that is to realize an innovation airport in Rotterdam, The Hague, as part of a aviation district in the Netherlands to work towards a sustainable aviation sector in the future, because we all know it was already before COVID the case that the aviation sector is polluting like other sectors, industrial sectors also in our region, the ports industries, the food sectors, they are all in a lock-in situation, just like the aviation sector. So that gave us the idea that we should give some change. And the way to change is to innovate, to become more sustainable. So those partners within the RIA network are working together to create an innovation airport to contribute to a sustainable aviation and an economic future for the aviation sector in the Netherlands. And of course, we also want to respond to COVID to do it better than before.
So this might be a nice opportunity, Albert and Theo, for you to link up and see whether there's an opportunity that this is a solution that can be used, because obviously, as you said, the market needs to be ready for it too. So that might be a good environment to see if this is applicable and if this indeed leads to adds to the solution. And then we might actually bring something to the table for you. Yeah.
I try to be very short. Number one is vaccination does not completely block transfer of virus. Okay. And secondly, the problem with testing is that basically it's impossible to test that somebody will not get COVID-19. Okay. Basically, the test is you don't have yet COVID-19 that we can test.
At the moment,
Yeah. Okay. And this is something that we need to keep in mind. So if really we want to make a contribution, then we need to look in terms of try to find ways that we can, number one, accept a acceptable risk. Okay. And we all need to understand that. And number two, that we start working on predictive mechanisms. And this will probably mean that we have to start testing people a couple of times in advance, okay? And maybe use that in combination with something like a contact tracer, so that after you have been tested, let's say 5 days before you take a plane, you're basically being followed, okay? Right. Well, I'm not going to say in quarantine because people will not. Yeah. But we need to find ways to do this. Okay.
But do you think there will be social acceptance, because the tracer we already have in the Netherlands is barely used? So innovation is not only a technical problem, and the technologies can be there, and it could be an idea to test and test over again and to trace. But there are also the people. They have to accept it's also a matter, innovation is also a matter of behavior, mentality.
In my presentation, one remark is that we've developed tools against people and not for people, basically. Okay? And we need to change that. Yes. So we need to give people tools that they believe in, that they see have a benefit for them. Now, I think there's different situations. I mean, if I take a flight for an hour, or if I take a train, then I don't expect everybody to have been in quarantine for 2 weeks. But if somebody would send me with the military to Afghanistan for 6 months, then I would probably insist that they do that. Okay. And for a cruise ship, it's probably something similar. So, I mean,
the solution
we need to be adaptive, and we need to make different risk calculations in the same way that credit card companies make different risk calculations for different transactions.
Clearly, it needs multiple stakeholders and multiple perspectives to get together. And so I would be interested, because obviously the Dutch, most of the Dutch are here as a representative. But how would we look at this from an international perspective? If we look what is happening here, gathering these perspectives, then it would be interesting as well, perhaps from Dakota Gruner, to hear your perspective. Is there a certain format that we can use to challenge ourselves? What is the way forward? Does our solution apply to this? Is our context, does it apply to this format? So in other words, we're trying to translate what are the practical solutions there? What are the conditions in order to implement these solutions? And are there any guidelines that you might be able to provide?
Sure, thank you so much. Would it be okay for me to share my screen?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yes.
Perfect. Can you see this?
Yes, absolutely.
Great. So thank you so much for having me. I'm Dakota Gruner from ID 2020 and the Good Health Pass Collaborative. And I've heard so many of you here today talking about the need for health passes, COVID passports. They come with many different names, although we do have strong opinions about what terms are used. And particularly the need for those solutions to be interoperable with one another and to be universally recognized and trusted. The Good Health Pass Collaborative is a group of over 120 companies and organizations who've come together to solve exactly that problem, to say what are the standards and specifications, as well as the trust framework that would be required in order to have health passes that are universally recognized for the purposes of international travel. As you've heard here today, there's been a huge debate over, in recent months around requiring proof of COVID for COVID health status to help restart international travel. There does seem to be huge momentum towards implementation of such programs. And what we've seen is dozens of solutions that have come to market. These vary greatly in terms of privacy, security, the degree to which they give individuals control over their personal data. And in the absence of standards, none of them are interoperable. And so what you end up with is sort of closed ecosystems where an individual can prove their health status within a particular country or within a particular organization's application, but not something that is widely recognized. What we see is that countries, airlines, businesses are rolling out these programs. And I think one of the things that I'd like to flag here is that, while I think for many of us, vaccination is beginning to open up businesses, and there's sort of a semblance of a degree to a return to normalcy. With the rise of new variants, and particularly with inequitable vaccine rollout, we anticipate that these programs will be with us for longer than some might expect. This is not sort of an immediate need and something that we will no longer use in 3 or 6 months' time. We do expect that health passes are going to become quite commonplace in the norm for at least a year to come. So the real question then is, how do we ensure that these solutions are good? How do we create the necessary standards or point towards the necessary standards that promote privacy and inclusivity? And how do we ensure solutions are interoperable with one another? Like I said, the Good Health Pass Collaborative, a multi-sector global initiative to establish principles and standards for digital health passes for international travel. So, thinking beyond many of the different efforts that have sprung up regionally or focused on a particular industry, but saying, how do we ensure interoperability across each? Over 100, I think this is a slightly outdated slide, over 120 endorsing organizations. The thing I'd want to point out here is there's real diversity of participation. We have organizations from the technology sector, from healthcare, from the travel and tourism space. Virginia has been a close partner of ours, and increasingly sort of government and private and public sector, civil society. These organizations have come together with, I think, very different, kind of inbound assumptions, but each one focused on this question of how do we ensure that health passes are good enough. The other thing notable here is that all of the major health pass solution providers, the commercial organizations who are developing health pass solutions, are participating in this. And with that, I think that's a really critical point, because it means that each of them have made a sort of notional commitment to working together with the necessary haste to have material interoperability. There are a handful of principles that have guided our work. Some of these are very technical, a focus on privacy and data security, user control, the use of open standards. Some are very much oriented around how we ensure that these are solutions that are appropriate, fit for purpose, and widely accessible. So, a real focus on urgency, on social responsibility and inclusivity. But I think one of the ones that I'd like to sort of call attention to is this one here in the top in the center on trust. Because the thing is that without health passes that are actually trusted and where there's, the issuer is known and there's reason to believe that it's someone who should be issuing that health pass. You could have a perfectly engineered technical solution, but without that trust, it's quite meaningless. And so what we've done is focus not only on the technical standards that would be required for interoperable health passes, but also on the trust framework and the governance that would be required to have that recognition and trust. I won't go into sort of full detail on this. I sort of made this point already, but there are a huge number of different, credential and pass initiatives out there. Some are nationally led or programs or sort of geographic initiatives. Some are focused more on the aviation or travel sector. Some are international. Some are more sort of around the underlying identity technology. And really, the aim of the Good Health Pass Collaborative was to say, how do we weave together all of these? How do we ensure that where there's differences between the approaches that some are suggesting, that we surface those differences, we do the sort of necessary landscape mapping, and ultimately can put forward a set of standards and specifications that integrates as much as possible of all of the good work that's happening around, around the world and sort of in different sectors into a singular blueprint that gives us collectively something to align to. I won't go through all of this, but I want to just sort of quickly say, what it does. And the first thing is that the blueprint was published for public review and comment yesterday. So I'm happy to share in the chat a link to that blueprint. We would welcome your feedback, your participation, and your help in socializing this document. It's a very comprehensive look at what it would take to have a globally interoperable digital pass and trust ecosystem, one with multiple different vendors and sort of easy movement between different environments. It covers a whole range of different sort of elements of interoperability challenges that would need to be addressed, ranging from the consistent user experience, identity binding, standard data models and elements, credential formats, and like I mentioned, trust registries, governance, and trust frameworks. And it's our belief that unless all of these interoperability challenges are addressed, and all of them are addressed from the perspective of the principles I outlined earlier, that we'll fall far short of the need for sort of health passes that are as interoperable as credit cards or passports. There are a few sort of key design considerations: individuals at the center of the data exchange, equity and inclusion, decentralization for global security and scalability, the use of open standards for interoperability and participation. And I think most importantly, sort of ensuring that all of this is pragmatic, that it's grounded in reality. And so we have phased recommendations that would support organizations who are participating or who are either as implementers, issuers, or verifiers to follow the GHPC requirements. And I'll skip through that. All of this is to say that what this does is allow us to sort of synthesize many different approaches to health certificates and credentials in order to ensure health passes that can be used universally and verified universally. And with that, ones that support selective disclosure, which we believe is vital for consumer protections and for privacy. Quick call to action. We're soliciting feedback on the recommendations in the blueprint now. I'll share that link here in the chat. But this really, we hope, becomes sort of a stake in the ground around which all of us can align in order to have health passes that meet, I think, the sort of aims and aspirations that Virginia and others have spoken to early in this call. So thank you so much. I'm happy to answer any questions and really appreciate, Harm, your participation in this and the participation of so many others. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And really impressed by the number of organizations stepping up and contributing. It's been, I'm really impressed by people and organizations in the world all coming together on this. And we see this in the Netherlands. We see this in Europe, and also we see this in an international level playing field, which is needed. As well. So more than 120 organizations drafting and sitting together and making specifications that are hard to come to agreements is amazing. Normally we did 10 years about those kind of specifications. And it leads me also to the challenge of how to make this communicated, what's needed to get this implemented and adopted. And maybe Ethan, you can give your perspective on that.
Sure. First off, thank you, Harm. I think, at the very onset, Virginia did an amazing job of setting out the challenge a little bit, the urgency of the situation, and likewise the need for collaboration. And I think that's, when we talk about the 120 organizations that make up the Good Health Pass Collaborative today, look, we started with 25 on February 9th. And literally over the course of just a couple of weeks, that grew to 80, and it's now grown to over 125. And then we talk about the development of the blueprint that Dakota was talking about, and that incorporated over 120 experts from the health, travel, and technology sectors who participated, literally gave hours upon hours of their time to participate in these drafting groups. This was an incredibly collaborative effort. And I think that as we talk about getting to a point, look, we are where we are today with respect to vaccination, both in terms of development of vaccines and the distribution of vaccines because of collaboration on a scale that we've never seen before. That's the same kind of collaboration that we need now in terms of getting to a point where we can have verifiable digital health passes that can be issued and ultimately universally accepted worldwide by airlines, border control agencies, and others. So I think that's really the key here. And so as we think forward, the challenge is this. We've put out this blueprint. We could use the feedback from the wide range of stakeholders, from solution providers. And the good news is that because of that collaborative process, a lot of the work on the technical side of building this consensus that, as you absolutely correctly pointed out, typically takes years and sometimes decades to achieve. Much of that work has already happened during the course of that. Now the question is, how do we take that out? How do we socialize that with relying parties, whether it's airlines, whether it's government border control agencies, health ministries, et cetera, and then likewise, how do we bring that to its conclusion in terms of universally accepted standards. And I think that's where I would say, we invite folks to join this effort. We put out, Harm, as you're well aware, a letter. We saw an opportunity with the upcoming G7 summit that starts on Friday. We put out a letter urging G7 leaders to adopt a statement of principles, and then B, to establish a working group made up of senior ministerial staff from G7, G20, and other nations that are interested in getting to this, because ultimately that's where we're going to have to get in order for that interoperability to occur. So similar relationship building and similar consensus building among governments as well is going to be absolutely critical to this.
Oh, thank you. And so trust comes a long way, but also I see a great match, an opportunity for the ValueTrack methodology to work together on this global challenge and at a pace that we have not walked before. But I think when we look at October, when we looked at the G20 agenda forming, this is a good starting point today, and it's timely because we just have the European digital certificate being made available in 1st of July. The Good Health Pass Principles is an invitation to see how things can be connected in a way that it is universal. And then maybe I can ask Ryan Barrett also to give his perspective and also give a little bit of introduction to what the Netherlands has been working on and the European Union.
Indeed. Hi, I'm Ryan Barrett. I'm currently working as a freelance architect on the Dutch COVID response, specifically on the digital COVID certificates from the EU. Do we have the slides available? I prepared one small slide to talk about. Here we go. This is what we're working on. This is the on the left, my left, you can see the EU digital certificate. This covers vaccinations, test results, and recovery. As you can see, the EU approach is about interoperability. It's about we've got 27 states. We've all got to talk to each other. Mm-hmm. We have also outside states who may wish to talk with us. Yes. Hopefully, the UK will join at some point. there's quite a lot of information in the certificate, as you can see. You have my full name, a fake date of birth, and some fake information on what's going to be put on my arm later this week.
Yeah.
The Dutch approach, we take a really a maximalized privacy approach. So you can see on a domestic green card, you can see a lot less information on the domestic green card. This is quite a key point because the fact that we are giving less information and using a dynamic signature system whereby you can't trace. If I scan here with several people, they can't link that to me. Okay. It's a different signature, completely untrackable signature. That allows the card to be used in more places than just the airport, just being scanned by the passport control people, because it's privacy first, privacy safe. Yes. And that enables us in Holland to use these passes for testen van toegang and other places.
So can you explain a little bit for the international audience testing for access?
Yeah, we've had a few trials here in the beginning of the year. As you might have seen, the football match with the Netherlands and a few concerts, where we have requested that people take a COVID test before they come, and that they load that into the app via commercial parties who provide the testing. Yes. And you show your QR code to a security person who scans you with our scanning app, the Dutch apps, and allows you to go in the case of a negative test.
Can I quickly interrupt? Is that not something where you said we can do this much faster? Sorry, I'm just curious. Like,
yeah, it's curious because checking we can take away if we use something of biometrics, for instance, face recognition, and it's safer because then you are 100% sure that you have the right people there, and this can be done in less than 1 second. And
okay, I see this as a challenge.
Yeah,
I see this as the next challenge to get together. And if this works and it's true, then why not share it on an international level? Because this is interesting, right?
So maybe you can also refer to the Good Health Pass initiative if there's similarity in the principles of privacy.
You see the good. When I look at the Good Health Pass, then I'm seeing the Good Health Pass providing some of the abilities that we provide with the Dutch system. It's learning from our privacy first, privacy protection measures to allow these technologies to be used in a more broader area in other countries, and also help the citizens of the world also benefit from our privacy first high democracy requirements.
That's what I heard as well from the entrepreneurs that we have in this database and who were at our events and connecting to us. They all said, well, on the negative side, we can't go to market in the Netherlands, and we have to go elsewhere. Though if we do get through the certification or through the strict rules, then it's actually an add-on if we want to export our products.
You're going to the eye of the needle here. Yeah. If you can pass through the eye of the needle, then you should be able to go to markets anywhere.
And maybe for Dakota and Ethan, it's good to hear that the principles that you've been kind of collecting and coming to a set of key principles for global interoperability, that the Netherlands seems to be adopting those principles already.
Yeah, but we've built from the ground up and we're pushing this.
So the question is, how can we, on an international level, see the example that we demonstrate in the Netherlands for international use across Europe?
Yeah.
So what's the challenge there?
The challenge is getting the buy-in and to internationally to other countries, showing them the clear benefits here, get the system working here, and show them why we can re-enable society.
So would you collaborate if we said that there was a call to action towards October to make sure that we have that and we do it and we're all involved?
Let's make it happen and make it happen as soon as we can, so we can all get back on holiday again.
I'm in.
Thank you.
Yeah, nice. Thank you. Okay.
I think if I may just jump in quickly on that one, because I think the challenge is obviously getting governments to understand the importance of this. We are also currently seeing the challenges at borders. Now, once volumes return, we're not going to be able to cope with the current systems. But another big challenge is going to be infrastructure at less developed regions. So we know not all the airports have the capability to adopt to digital solutions. So that's going to be another challenge for the less developed countries.
This is where I can see Kees in the back and you can't, and I can see both of you nicking. And this is maybe what is also interesting, and unfortunately he couldn't be here due to some other reasoning, and it was serious. But that's what we could also discuss with Tom van Gessel, for example. So I very much like this network of multi-stakeholders where these insights can really, give us, it's for the individual is interesting, but it's also for the collective. So thank you very much, Virginia, and we'll get some feedback here as well. Yes. Sorry, I'm getting enthusiastic, that's me.
But that's exactly what needs to be. So this is the magic that we try to achieve when people and organizations come together.
Yes, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Arjan Geluk. I work with UL, and in ISO IEC over the last 5 years, I've been leading the development of an international standard for digital credentials, especially the protocols for interchange between mobile device resident credentials, and verification equipment. So one question I have regarding the privacy first focus in the Dutch vaccination certificate. One thing that bothers me is that when I have to present the negative test result, I always have to show my full driver's license or my full ID card. Do you have a solution that protects me from disclosing everything? Is there and just provide the proof that this face matches with a negative test?
What's the answer to that?
Not in the not from the current design of the COVID apps does not allow that, the Dutch COVID apps, the EU COVID apps. Maybe there's a market solution which could.
Yes, I think that's the goal.
I think it's a good question. If we don't raise the question, and I think it's, we already know the answer, and it's not something that you can solve straight away. But this is exactly why the ValueTrack is there, bringing small pieces of the puzzle together to make it happen. It's not a static process, but it's merely collaboration, as you all said. Absolutely. Being transparent, know who does what in this whole, big arena, because we do all want to innovate. We all want this freedom, and we all want to be back on our feet again, like we said, going from A to B in public places.
So it's a good time also to maybe look at other initiatives that have been taken in this specific area of complexity. Peter van Koelen, is he?
But if Arjan, I think Arjan wanted to say something still.
Well, one thing that I was wondering is when privacy impact assessment was done, has it been weighed in what exposure you actually have at the moment of interaction? So that not only you look at what is passing through my system, and do I indeed only have my first name initial, my last name initial, and a partial date of birth and a negative test result associated to it, but has it been evaluated that people actually show everything when they pull out their passport or ID card or driver's license, when they actually have to prove that that negative test belongs to them?
Could I jump in very quickly on this?
Yes, please.
So one of this topic of selective disclosure, only sharing sort of a subset of the information has been a real priority for the Good Health Pass Collaborative. When we thought about sort of key design principles required to have a health pass that was indeed good, we recognize that individuals will use their health passes in a wide a number of different settings, that in those settings, disclosing different types or different amounts of information will be appropriate. You may want to share all of your information for the purposes of getting your second dose of the vaccine for continuity of care, but much, much less if you're using it to enter, sort of a public space. And so with that, we, the credential format, signature and exchange protocol that the Good Health Pass Collaborative is suggesting for use in health passes is one that does support selective disclosure. This is, sort of I think a very arcane, specific technical choice, but one that we think has really sort of profound implications. And happy to connect with others on sort of the choice that we've made, the suggestions that we're making.
Nice. Very nice.
Absolutely. So that's a good segue into my question to Peter Verkoelen. Is he online? Can he add?
Yes.
Very good. Welcome and good to see you.
Thank you.
Sorry you cannot be here face-to-face and physical, but appreciate your joining.
Very chic wall you've got there.
Thanks.
Yes. So maybe you can give a little bit of a background of your role in the different organizations in the Netherlands, and what's driving you in this day of COVID with digital identity or decentralized identity better.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I think actually connecting to the discussions of the past 5 to 10 minutes. But very briefly, I'm heading the Dutch Blockchain Coalition, which is a private-public cooperation with a number of large companies, public organizations, and also Dutch knowledge institutes, let's say, trying to solve societal challenges using decentralized technology. A number of SSI use cases, and let's say when in April 2020, the health department within the Netherlands called for help on various topics, we jumped in with a new consortium which we called Unlock. The focus at that time was on the contact tracing apps, and that was not something that we were working on, but the Unlock group of companies and public organizations was indeed thinking about, let's call them digital health passes, although we didn't use that term at that time. Where privacy is obviously very important, secure way of sharing data, but also this aspect of really making sure that I can only get access to something based on my negative test result or my vaccination proof, and not of that of my neighbor or my daughter, so to say. And in the approach that we took, I will not go into technical details, obviously, but there are, I think, 3 elements that are relevant if I look to the discussion that we have been having in the past 1.5 hour. One is that indeed we let's say the user of the Unlock solution fetches his or her identity from the passport or the driver's license, and uses his or her photo. And then, so when he shows up at a point where he has to prove that, well, either he has a recent test, negative test, or he has been vaccinated, then he shows his wallet, and then either his photo shows up with a green screen, and then the verifier can let him in, or a red screen pops up if he doesn't meet the criteria, obviously, and then there's also no photo because I just have a red square, and I can't get in based on that, no matter what person I would be, so to say.
So this is exactly the selective disclosure that we were talking about.
Yeah, that's what we were just talking about. The other element is connected to inclusivity. We say we always will have to have a paper trail solution, but with the same amount of, let's say, privacy and security. So that's also part of the solution, which we solved in the kind of server-based wallet. So there's still a similar, let's say, background infrastructure that's used, but in the end, a person can get a printed QR code with the same, let's say, information. And I think the third element, and I think somebody touched a bit upon it in the start of this session, is that we say it's also important to make sure that not everybody can just, let's say that he wants to read my information for me to get in. So we have the so-called verify the verifier aspect,
Okay.
Then so I show up, I scan a QR code at the venue that I want to get into, and then I also know who wants to have my information, and also, let's say, is looking into that. And there's also proof of that if there would be, let's say, discussions or misunderstandings between quotes in the aftermath.
So you see a good match actually with what has been done locally in the Netherlands, what has been done over the past couple of months internationally. So how do you see those two paths cross again and help each other?
Yeah, a few remarks. I think that one is that we are discussing obviously international travel and, let's say, the interoperability needed for that. But then when I'm in a specific country, be it in the Netherlands or when I go to France, hopefully in the summer on a holiday, I also have to be able to move around over there and go to a theater or bar or restaurant, etc. So it's both the international travel and, let's say, the local actions that you want to take when you are home or abroad. It doesn't matter. Yeah. So I think that we would love to be involved in these kinds of, let's say, interoperability engineering efforts that have to take place and can serve as a kind of pilot environment to do so. Yeah, and the other thing is that, I mean, like was just mentioned by the previous speaker, the Dutch Health Ministry has decided to develop, let's say, their own solution. We still have, of course, let's say, our approach and our solution and the knowledge that and the experience that we gained. And of course, we love to make that available to any next step that can be defined, because this is something that we have to deal upon together. And it's not something that the companies, let's say, and the organizations working on Unlock started to make a profit, but they started this to, well, A, help to get society a little bit more open again, and B, let's say, yeah, this is also a huge, let's say, showcase for the SSI, yeah, way of working, way of thinking, so to say.
Thank you. Well, so it's timely now, and I'm just checking. Is also André de Kok in the call from our Dutch ministry? If not,
I haven't seen him.
Then we can skip to Gil from. Hi. Yes, I see you. Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, and I can hear you as well. Very good, and welcome, Gail. I'm honored that you are here. Through I think our mutual friend Don Thibault, we were able to speak last week, and I was really excited to hear you were able and willing to join us today. And especially with your background, so maybe you can give a little bit of introduction of who you are and which organizations you represent for the audience.
Sure.
And then we can talk about the couple of activities that really has a good match with what we are discussing today in this roundtable.
Absolutely, thank you, Harm.
So by way of yes.
Sure. So by way of a quick background, which I think the slide will show, I am working with two different organizations. So on the left-hand side, you can see the OpenID Foundation is an organization works on globally interoperable standards. Some of you might have come across OpenID Connect or the financial grade API, which are being used today for billions of logins around the world. So if you've ever used a login with Apple, log in with Google, log in with Microsoft, one of those types of solutions, it's kind of knit into the fabric of the internet and has been since 2007. And more recently, over the last couple of years, open banking is being enabled through the financial grade API standard developed in the OpenID Foundation in the UK, Australia, and shortly in Brazil, and looking to be adopted in Germany and the Middle East, and probably the US as well. So there's great work on the standards within the OpenID Foundation. And the nonprofit board is chaired by some of the real players in the global ecosystem, including Microsoft, Google, NRI, and KDDI, both from Japan, Verizon, Ping Yubico, and Verizon Media. So the kind of playing field, although it has started out as kind of identity and financial services, has applications to health, has applications to government, mobile networks, general KYC capabilities, and so forth. So one of the things I was discussing with Dakota offline is to get a better sense of where her blueprint work was and the degree to which the standards body like the OpenID Foundation can contribute and help support some of the efforts that they're making. And I know that they're collaborating with the W3C already around verifiable credentials. Sometimes a forum like the OpenID Foundation and the members there can kind of crack the code in a way before or more quickly than Arjan's work at the ISO or the W3C is able to. So they can kind of do some quick work on standards, if you will, and then hand it back over, to another entity like the W3C or IETF or ISO. So that's one hat that I have, and that's a new role for me as of May this year. On the right-hand side is the Future Identity Council. It's an organization comprised of, well, the mission of the Future Identity Council is to help governments issue digital versions of physical credentials. So Arjan mentioned earlier mobile driving licenses. That could also be mobile passports as well as mobile national IDs, and basically to help governments to develop those credentials and kind of work on the meat and potatoes that sits between standards and policy, because it is such a new emerging technology. So we are working with 6 different countries, including the Netherlands, 9 US states, and 3 federal departments in order to craft those guidelines. And the first draft of those guidelines will be issued over the course of the next month or two. And it's the AMVA, which is the Association of US Motor Vehicle Administrators. Their intention is to adopt many of those guidelines and incorporate that into their plans for a digital trust service, which will be something called a master key list, which is their effort to kind of help support their member states and North American issuers of credentials. So the Future Identity Council is comprised of not just government entities, but also private sector players and interest groups that are thought leaders in the domain. And again, trying to work on the practicalities of bringing that to life. So kind of in reference to the wider conversation that we've just been having, I'm keen to make sure that the 2 different groups that I'm working with are able to kind of play a natural role where it makes sense to help support some of the efforts that you've been describing. And crucially, I think there's 2 different things. One is the short-term deliverables, like what current technologies, capabilities, relationships are already in place to solve the immediate problems you've discussed around people flows. And then what are the more medium-term, the infrastructure, the identity infrastructure that needs to be developed in order to help address not just the travel industry's growth maybe in the next 2 years or so, but also the infrastructure we need for the foreseeable future as our physical world and our digital worlds are converging. So there's real need for governments and the private sector to invest in the identity infrastructure we need together.
Wow, and I like how you frame this as well in timeframes, because this is really the approach of the ValueTrack as well. So how can we address today's crisis or really urgency for collaboration and also testing, and so maybe a pilot in the short term that can we already demonstrate some key enablers for building this kind of trust in the digital ecosystem. It's also in line with what the European Union has just recently announced to have a European digital wallet, an identity wallet. And countries will be able to work together on specifications. And I think people that are sitting here in this room and online are really close to what needs to help in the digital transition today towards tomorrow, right, and in the timelines that we envision. So thank you for reaching out and also your call to action here.
Feel free, if you have any more specific calls to action or concrete, ideas on that, then please feel free to share it with us, because that's actually our task. Also, facilitating this value track means that we can go out and lobby. We do have this network available, and it's, you know, globally. Our other task is to put you in a spotlight where we said, okay, we want to convince the government about a certain business case, or maybe it's even, you know, a bunch of citizens who need to say, yes, I want that data, I want to share that data, just, you know, to inspire and move people. It won't be in one go, but let's, you know, make sure that these steps are going to be there next, faster and better. And obviously, more than happy to match. So anyone, share it with us, and we'll make sure to catch up on it. But before.
Yes, so the last part, and I like the remark that it is both digital and physical. And so we started with that conversation with OGC, which is really about enabling the data and location side of the data and making it available to use cases like traveling or just busy places. How can we do events again? I would love to go to the concerts again. So what's your perspective as one of the leading organizations in the design and also the implementation of safe traveling, but also safe cities?
Yeah, my name is René Hofstake. I'm from Netherlands Airport Consultants, NACO. I'm an airport engineer. So indeed, I will look at it from a very practical perspective. And what I hear, I think there's a lot of great technology available. But one of the things that I think is a big challenge is the people that want to opt out, for example. I mean, there are quite a lot of people that don't like to be vaccinated. So we can have a pass. Well, on the pass, maybe we can also register if people are being tested. But how are we going to deal with tests? I think if I'm looking at it from the aviation perspective, do I want to buy a ticket if I have to test myself and I'm not sure if I can go on that plane? I think that's a very big challenge for the aviation industry and for airlines in particular, to fight and to see how we can deal with that. I think that's a complexity that needs to be overcome.
I see the complexity. And so what's your perspective on that?
Well, I already introduced myself, so I won't do that again. I also work for the government. So I work for an engineering firm, but I'm hired by governments like the Netherlands Railways or the city of Amsterdam to organize crowd monitoring systems to optimize crowd management, because I think it's not only about the trip and the travel, it's also about the destiny and public space. And there you can also look from out of a perspective that when you see when it gets too crowded, when the contamination risk rises, when you can avoid that, when you can prevent that, that is also very helpful. And that is the area I'm moving in. What you see is you also have the democratic processes that you need to include. And so it's very important to understand what triggers the democratic process and what boxes needs to be ticked. It's very delicate, and it's not only about the rules, it's also about the perception of the public. Sometimes you follow the rules, but then the perception can turn against you, and then you still have a problem. What also is very important, I think, what is a big challenge is to find the logic. What is the actual case you want to solve? And then involve the parties that needs to work in there together. And what you see in the Netherlands is that there's a huge amount of data. The Netherlands Railways have a lot of data. ProRail, who is responsible for the infrastructure, also has a lot of data. The police has data, and but still there's data missing, and then we organize that as well. But then the big challenge is to bring it all together. And it's not only about the data, it's also about the whole governance around it, privacy-wise, security-wise, and then, I think, I can't see her right now, but it is about trust and getting to know each other and building an ecosystem and building those ecosystems where people work together well, it's a challenge, but that is also the solution.
So based on that insights and experience, so what do you suggest then as from a call to action point of view? Do you see places in the Netherlands or maybe Rotterdam that are suitable for this?
Well, I believe in learning by doing, because all these dynamics are very complex. There's so many layers. There's so many people involved that do not actually understand each other. Everyone has his own like language. Even now we talk Dutch and English. It gives us sometimes a lost in translation dynamic. But when you have an engineer, a data engineer, talking to the mayor of Amsterdam, it's like talking from Holland to someone from China, and there's even a bigger gap to overcome. Yes, so learning by doing, and I believe in that, small steps, but think big. And well,
that's our motto.
Cool.
So maybe you can step up, Miranda, because you said that this is our motto.
Yes, it is.
And we are kind of getting out to the conclusion of our session as well. So I think maybe what's your conclusion of these statements? Learning by doing. How can we make that work?
Yeah, for me, it's a feast of recognize
Yes.
what we also learn in the RIA network, of course, because I think learning by doing is the key. Trusting each other is the key. That's why we are working together with 70 parties, with different offsprings, but always doing small, thinking big, and trying to make real projects working. And then we find the difficulties we are talking about this afternoon, of course, because the technology is often there. The technology is often not yet proven and certificated because you need a regulation, and that is always on a higher level to be achieved. So in Rotterdam, we try to make an innovation space, so to say, for those 70 parties at an operational airport to have a testing ground, for example, for the EPD scan, because that also has to be proven and it has to get certificated. I see that they can do it in Johannesburg and at Bonaire, but in the Netherlands, it's a real challenge because of the regulation, but maybe also because the partners has to be connected, has to be matched. So I believe in an approach to make a value track in which you combine innovation, technology, regulation, partnerships, and location, to make it a little bit smaller, because the world is our playground. But when you can test and develop it in Rotterdam or Amsterdam at an airport with parties who are working together, then the success rate of the innovation will be higher.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yes.
So thank you so
we
much.
can do it.
Yeah, I'd like to add something to that, to make the package complete, the whole present. There is a lot of experience in Amsterdam and at the Netherlands Railways. And I think there's also a big opportunity to not learn those lessons again, but take them in and use those lessons, because I started with a crowd monitoring system in Amsterdam 3 years ago. And now it's actually used by for the European Championship in Holland. I don't know, like some people are from the States, I think.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, it's a soccer competition in Europe, and a lot of people like it, and it has a big impact also on the city of Amsterdam. Yeah. And to make that area safer, it's important to also see how busy it is to manage those crowds. And to do that well, we monitor the crowds, and not like we don't identify them. All the data we use is anonymized, and it's like people per square meter. And there actually we work together with all the parties involved, with the Netherlands Railways, with ProRail, with the Johan Cruijff Arena, and all the other event operators.
So you have already started?
I think that cities are a very good testing ground for cross-sectoral innovation. So yes. Amsterdam is a smart city for crowd control, so to say.
Crowd monitoring.
We're getting closer. The good part is that we all agree there's a lot of complexity, but we all see that there's willingness to share insights, to learn from one another and to collaborate. And this goes from the technical solutions given to us by entrepreneurs and other innovators to the people in the field out there who have a hard time getting all these standards, because obviously it's still not simple, but we have to get there anyway. So there's no choice. There is light at the tunnel, clearly. And this is where you started off, Bart. So perhaps give us one last go on, are we going to adopt these calls to action and really work on it and make sure that in October, the next thing happened? We did it.
Yeah, it's what I call the after next.
After next again.
No. I think what we saw today was a lot of great initiatives.
Yeah.
I saw great collaboration with the W3C. OGC collaborates as well on sharing data or location data on the web. So great to see that. And I want to pick up on, I think Dakota was her name. But what I call the after next. So once we have the good health path, then what are we going to do? And how can we combine that with then something else?
Yeah.
That, and again, intrinsically, I believe that location will play a major part in this, and that, the folks that we have here can actually come together. It's what I call the after next, and then innovate based on that next step that we make. How can we help the Rotterdam, the Hague Airport in innovating what is the next step once we have that good health data or pass. Within the OGC, we have the innovation program. That's what I call, we're eating our own dog food, pardon me for the expression. But that is, to the gentleman's point earlier on, is interoperability is fine, but let's prove that the standards work. And that's exactly what we do, is we have legislation built on our standards, their ISO standards as well, but making sure that they actually work and that we can work together here in this room on the variety of initiatives that we have and come together and grow and get better and for a better society ultimately, so that we can go ahead and shake hands and who knows, we can hug each other. Wow.
So you love this. So actually, because we're actually already on the countdown, when we started this off, I thought 2 hours was like a lot of time. And I think all the people who didn't have any pillows on this tribune are thinking the same thing. Though to me, it was extremely intriguing to hear all of you talking. And it's just amazing how much power there is, how much intelligence there is. And I'm looking forward actually to continue this and make sure that we follow up until October and then get to the next challenge. And then we'll take like 3 or 4 hours. But for now, I very much thank you for all your efforts, your input. And I think, Harmjan, you're the ValueTrack lead for people flows. Are you happy?
Oh, I'm overly excited. And that's the magic that I was hoping for. So thank you, Tess. This is running as better than expected. And even with Tom van Gessel not able to join, but it also shows us the how everything is depending on safety and security of airlines, of cyber, of digital. So I think it just demonstrates that there's a sense of urgency, and together we really can make an impact. So thank you all for listening and tuning in.